Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mum and Son Run podcast. In this episode, we're talking all about running shoes, a topic that my mum knows a lot about because she owns about 2,000 pairs. Now, one of the most common questions that I get asked on social media is, what pair of running shoes should I be wearing? Now, unfortunately, it's a difficult question to answer because there's so many variables to be taken into account. So in this episode, we discuss it and break it down a little bit and give you some things to think about to send you on your way and make the right decision for you. We also discuss how to know when your shoes are past their best and need replacing, and what to do with them afterwards, as there are many sustainable ways of getting rid of your shoes now. We hope that you enjoy the episode. Let's get into it. Back again. Hello, Mum. How are you? How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, son. And how are you?
I am very well. What is new in the world of Catherine Shanley?
Well, I cooked my first ever roast dinner last weekend. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
That is new, actually. We could touch on
That,
your
yeah,
ability to cook a roast dinner because
yeah,
for
yeah,
32 years of my life, you've been pretending that you can't. And it turns out, after making 2 roast dinners in the last couple of weeks, that you very much can. So, who knew?
yeah. So I did a practice the week before Easter on you and Ian, and you both survived.
Yeah.
So I cooked a dinner on Easter Sunday. So yeah,
For a lot
yeah,
of people as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
for like, what was it, maybe 10? 10?
There were nine of us. Well, there was Emmy as well, but obviously Emmy wasn't eating. But
Yeah.
yeah, so nine
She
people
she
eating.
spat out a roast
So yeah,
potato at one point. For anyone listening, Emmy is my niece. It's not a dog or. But yeah, very very impressed with your roast potatoes
yeah,
and Yorkshire puddings. But also, you've got some good news
yeah,
in. On the day of recording this, tomorrow is going to be your
yeah.
first run in many many months.
6 months, yeah, over 6 months. Yeah, so you say a run, I mean 3 minutes in total,
It's a run.
broken down into 6 30 seconds, but there were times where I thought I'd never even get to this point. So
Yep.
yeah, just goes to show that, you sometimes just have to keep the faith, keep putting one foot in front of the other. No pun intended, because at times I couldn't put one foot in front of the other, but metaphorically speaking.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's a big day tomorrow, really,
Yeah,
and
it
I
is.
think
And it's being
a little
grateful, I
bit,
think, having that gratitude. And I know there'll be a part of you that is humbled by it because, you've ran ultra endurance events, but ultimately you've got to
yeah,
meet your body where it's at now and appreciate it for what it can give you now, knowing what it couldn't give you for the last 6 months. And
absolutely,
get excited about the small things, I guess. But yeah, that's
yeah,
that's exciting that's coming up. Are you feeling confident,
yeah,
comfortable, or are you a bit nervous about it?
yeah, a bit of both, really, bit of both. I think I'm learning through the rehab process that being terrified is part of the process. In as much as the exercises have progressed, there's been varying levels of being terrified about, will my Achilles snap
Mm.
again? But I think I've done enough rehabilitation, both by way of exercises, by way of walking, to give myself as much confidence as I think I dare have at this moment in time about the run tomorrow. And if it doesn't feel right, you know what? I'll just stop, and I'll report back into the physio on Monday. The beauty of having somebody who's an expert guiding you all the way through it
Mm.
is I can speak to him, and if it doesn't feel right, it will talk and we'll adjust the plan
Yeah.
accordingly. So,
Well, that's all you can do,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. And what about you? So the last time we did a podcast, you were going to race, bizarrely enough, of all the park runs in the world, you were going to go out and race Lime Park Run.
Yeah,
Now I know how it went, so I can't
you
say
were
I
there.
can't be like I was actually there cheering you on,
You were.
shouting, there's only half a part run to go.
You did, in fact, shout that to me as I ran past you, yeah, which was, it gave me a huge surge of hatred towards you. But yeah, it went well. So I started off with, I ran down there, so it's about 2 miles from the door, got myself ready. And you're right, it's not really a park run that you go to if you're wanting to see where you're at with your 5K distance, really. It's hilly. The first kilometer, I think, is uphill. Then you have some nice
Yeah.
downhills, but it's all on uneven terrain. It's quite rocky. It can be quite muddy. So difficult to kind of, get into full flow. Very fun. But in terms of like a PB track, it's the opposite. And then to make things worse, the last kilometer is uphill as well on grassy terrain.
Yeah, and I was chatting with somebody last week, running Palomine, and he said he calls that the end of the Lyme Park run Treacle Hill because he feels like whenever he does it, he's not getting anywhere. His feet are just stuck
Yeah,
in
it's
treacle, and
horrible.
I totally get
It's horrible.
it.
It's a mixture of things. It's the fact that yes, you've put the work in already for 4 kilometers, so your legs are tired and you have got that lactic acid starting to build up. But it's also, I think, the fact that it's on grass, you just can't. You're not
Grass, yeah,
striking the ground as hard, so you're not getting the same kind of forward propulsion. It just feels like everything's working against you. And if there's a bit of a headwind as well, you can lose your mind on that last hill. It's a very gradual uphill, but it went well, I would say. It's hard to stack it up in terms of like against my previous PB. So at the moment, I'm trying to break 17 minutes. Um, with my PB at the moment being 17:55, so there's a long way to go, obviously. But I was never going to do it on that track, and I came in just under 20 minutes on a hot day, and I'll take that. It wasn't the
but you also came in first place.
yeah, yeah.
Perhaps you weren't going to mention that, but as a proud mum,
Yeah, you've
obviously.
been telling everyone, bloody hell, the neighbours know. But yeah, I managed
Well,
to win it, if you can call it winning it,
oh,
which
don't tell the park run
I
people that.
know.
They won't
Well,
quite
to
want.
be
Yeah,
honest,
it's not a race.
the atmosphere when I crossed the finish line was a bit strange. I felt a bit odd for crossing the finish line first, but somebody has to. But it's
Yeah,
almost like because it's not a race, the person who wins it almost gets daggers, and I didn't get like loads of applause and cheers over it was a
yeah,
bit of a graveyard, so I felt a bit
yeah.
strange. But yeah, if I'm acting differently, it's because I'm now the proud winner of a park run. And everything I said in the park run episode about it being about community and not being a race, and I take it back because it's all about winning, and I won. So no, I'm joking. But yeah, this week's episode is all about running shoes. Now, this is probably one of the most spoken about topics out there. Most of the questions that I get from people on social media are either revolving around injuries or what running shoes should I buy? And it's such
Mm.
a difficult question to answer because of the many, many variables that need to be taken into account when you're thinking about buying some running shoes. So hopefully in this episode, we can help people make an educated decision, or at least point them in the direction of where they could go, and give them some things to think about before they maybe blindly jump onto a website and buy a pair of shoes off the way that they look, or off somebody else running them, which is both things that I've done in the past. So I'm a hypocrite, but I know better now. So yeah, let's get straight into it in terms of what is there to think about when you're looking to buy a pair of running shoes. What goes through your mind, Mum, when you're approaching it?
I suppose now, if I was to rewind to when I first started running, you didn't buy shoes online then. And I think that's quite a fortunate thing, really, because the temptation is there now just to sit scrolling through a website and pick a pair based on how they look, the colours, etc. So, for me, I went to a running shop. Not initially, I have to say. I was trying to think when I knew we were doing this subject, I was trying to think of what was the first pair, what did I run in when I very first went out running? And I certainly didn't go out and buy anything.
Plimsolls,
No, I'm not that old.
Roger
I
Bannister
didn't wear,
style.
no, I definitely didn't run in plimsolls. It would have been whatever trainers were in the wardrobes. As somebody that kind of did do exercise classes and went to the gym, I'd have had something that I thought were, and at the time would have thought they were perfectly adequate for running. So it was only, I suppose, when I realised that I wanted to take it a bit more seriously and I wanted to do some racing, I started to think about, well, what do I do? Am I running in the right shoes? So I actually went into a shop in Manchester on Deansgate. Still, well, it wasn't on Deansgate then, but it is on Deansgate now. And I went in and asked them, and they stuck me on a treadmill and said, "Here you go, give you a pair of running shoes," and did my gait analysis. So, and I'd recommend that to anybody who's just starting out in running and is wanting to kind of, is taking it seriously enough to want to race, or not even race, but just wants to be making sure that they're running in the right footwear that doesn't damage their feet.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I knew I was a neutral runner. I'd never heard of Mizuno shoes. They're an American brand, and that's what we went through a number of different brands of shoes, and they record you and they play it back and they look at whether there's any pronation and the responsiveness of your foot. And I went into Mizuno Wave Riders and I wore those for many years, various kind of versions of the Wave Rider. And yeah, that was as much attention as I paid to it. I went in, got my gait analysis done. They recommended a shoe, like I just said about, working with a physiotherapist, working with somebody whose job it is to understand runners and the biomechanics of it. I took their advice and, like I say, carried on wearing their shoes for many years.
Yeah, you definitely took the
What
right
about you?
approach
What were
then.
your first pair of shoes?
Oh God, like it, in terms of proper running shoes, my first pair were Hoka 11s, I think. And I bought them because there's a guy called, what's his name? I always
The
get,
Bondi's, was that?
they could have been
That the
Bondi's,
Bondi?
yeah. But
No, it wouldn't have
basically,
been Bondi. It wouldn't have been 11.
I bought them because, is it Josh Patterson? He used to be a made in Chelsea, but I just know him as an endurance runner. He was doing
Yeah.
backyard ultra marathons. It was literally an ultra marathon in his back garden, running the same
I
loop.
remember.
I think he did
I
five in
remember
five
during
days.
COVID.
And I saw him wearing these shoes and I liked the look of them, so I bought them. And that was my first pair of running shoes. But before that, I'd ran a few 10Ks and 5Ks.
We should point out that you were not a running coach at this time.
No, no, I was just a newbie making all the same mistakes that, everybody else
Yeah.
tends to make. Nobody's immune to making these mistakes when you first get in because you don't know better. And sometimes you just think, well, a running shoe is a running shoe. They're all called running shoes. So, they're all built to run in. And what more could there be to making a decision? But
Yeah.
yeah, obviously, the more my interest in running grew, the more I wanted to know about what running shoes could do for performance and support. So I got more and more into it, and then I eventually signed up for a marathon, and I did the majority of my miles in those Hokas. They were more like everyday runners. And then I wanted to buy a pair that I was going to race in. So I told myself, just, stay calm, don't go for the latest carbons, because I think at that point the 4%, the Nike 4% would just been dropped. So like the Alpha Flies and Vapor Flies. I think it was the Vaporfly 2. And I said, just go and get yourself a pair of Hokas similar to what you've got. And I bought a pair of Jazzy Hokas, and unfortunately they were a little bit too small. So I still didn't go into a shop and get them checked. I just bought them online. And then bless you, bless you, I took that as a sign from the universe that I should send those Hokas back and get the carbon plated shoes that I told myself not to get. So I bought some Vaporfly 2s and I ran my first marathon in Vaporfly 2s. But taking it back a little bit to what you might think of when you're heading out to buy a pair of running shoes, and you mentioned the gait analysis, and the gold standard of going to buy a running shoe is to go and get your gait analysis done. That is the best advice that we can give you, because there's so much to think about, whether you strike the ground with your heel first, whether you're a midfoot striker, whether you're a forefoot striker, whether you strike the ground on the outside, or maybe you have kind of flat feet, or you strike the ground on the inside. Maybe you have narrow feet, or maybe you need a wider toe box. All of these things need to be taken into account. Also, what the aim of the shoe. So are you buying them to race in? Are you buying them for everyday running? Are you buying them because you're running trails and you've got maybe an ultra marathon on trails coming up? All of this needs to be taken into account. But one thing I will say is, if you're buying one pair of shoes and you plan to wear these shoes for everything, you want to kind of fall somewhere in the middle, leaning more towards the more supportive side. So don't go out and buy the alpha flies or the vapor flies. I know everybody's wearing them. I know all the influencers have got them and they run, their easy runs in them. But I really wouldn't suggest having a pair of carbons as your only pair of shoes just because they offer so little support, and they're great in certain circumstances for racing and for some long runs, because ultimately your carbon plated shoe puts less impact and strain through your feet and calves. So actually, if you were running a longer run and you run it in carbons, your ability to recover will be slightly better because you've not been bashing those muscles throughout the long run. So there's a time and a place to wear carbons, but ultimately, if you ran all the time in carbons, those muscles would get weak and underactive, and that could cause you a lot of issues. And also just the fact that they last about 200 miles. So if you want to be replacing your shoes very, very frequently, and carbons are very, very expensive, then, go for it. But I personally would suggest something down the middle of the road. So I would say there's like a scale, and on one end there's performance, and it's like lightweight shoes and light materials and built to make you go fast, and on the other end is support and stability, and I would say that's more for like your ultra marathons on uneven terrain, and maybe you're going to be getting them wet a lot, and they need to be a bit more durable, because let me tell you, if you run on uneven terrain in your carbons or gritty and muddy terrain, your carbons will last about a week before you need to replace them. But you're the right person to speak to, really, Mum, on this topic because of your 2,000 pairs of running shoes in the garage. It's safe to say that buying running shoes can get a little bit addictive, can't it? Like, you are constantly searching for the
Without a doubt.
latest and the newest.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, yeah. And so many, just going back though to, the gait analysis, I think the great thing about gait analysis is that, your local running shop generally will knock you the price of the cost of carrying out a gait analysis. They'll knock it off a pair of shoes if you buy a pair of shoes following your gait analysis. So it's well worth checking out your local store, checking out where you can get gait analysis done, and it won't actually cost you anything more than your shoes would have cost you if you'd just walked through the door and not had it done. So it's a no-brainer for me to absolutely have it done, and not to only have it done once. So I've had it done a number of times over the years. I'm pretty sure that, I was a neutral runner when I first had it done, and I'm a neutral runner now, but things can change. So it's always well worth just reassuring yourself that the shoes that you're buying, because then you can go and you can buy online, where you can sometimes get the better deals. I'm a fan of kind of supporting your local running shop, but I've done both. So, and I've bought them online from my local running shop as well. So yeah, I think just going back to gait analysis, definitely check out your local running shops. But yeah, it's addictive. Lots of stores now have try-on sessions. Those are well worth it. So if you're new to running and you're bewildered by the sheer amount of shoes and you don't want to make a very expensive mistake, then check out which of your stores is having try-on evenings. So, our local stores have had Hoka, they've had On, Asics, Saucony, and I would imagine all the big brands do try-on sessions
So
in,
on
in
these try-on
stores.
sessions, are you kitted out with a pair, and then do you get to go and
Yeah.
have a little run in them as well?
Yeah. Yeah, they take you out, you go out for a run. So Running Bear in Alderley Edge is an example of one of our
Yeah.
local stores puts on pizza. So there's a great reason for going along. And actually they have it's not just for the try on evening. They actually do run sessions from the shop. But for those going along for the try on evening, yeah, you're kitted out with a pair of the shoes. Off you go out. Generally about 5K. I think we did a speed session actually with one of the sessions from Running Bear, and then back to the store for pizza. And they also usually run a competition. Somebody wins a pair of shoes, which is always good fun. So yeah, it's definitely worth. And you know, it's a social event. Running is a very social thing, and there's another thing that is, you know, part of that running community is you can go along and you get the chance to speak to people in the store and experts from the brand that's running the session. So
Yeah,
I've done a
perfect.
few of them. Have I ever bought a pair of shoes? I don't think I have. I mean, I
Just
was
there for
already
the
in
pizza.
Hoka's when yeah, well, the pizza and the run out, but I'm always interested in, you become brand, you know, you develop an affinity to a brand. So Hoka was my brand for many years, in the same way Mizuno was when I first started. I kind of moved to Hoka when they were the very first shoes that kind of looked like a pair of platforms, and people did look at you very strangely when you were wearing them. And then I had many years in Hoka's before I've kind of swapped over to Adidas for my road shoes and more recently. But yeah, you know, it's a good opportunity to go and check out some other brands that you may not have any knowledge of.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great point, and I do agree that you kind of find a brand and you do tend to stick with them. And I do think there is something to be said about finding a running shoe that you like the feel of, that does what you're looking for it to do, and then sticking with that shoe. I think you can get lost in it all of chasing the latest thing. And obviously the technology has come so far now. So let's talk a little bit about carbons because they seem to be all the rage, and obviously we've both ran in carbon plated shoes. Do you remember the first time you ran in carbons? Because I remember my first run and feeling like Bambi on ice because of the lack of stability in these Vaporfly 2s. They took some getting used to. I really felt the difference, but also I did feel that forward propulsion. And one of the execs at Nike who's involved in kind of the designing of these carbon plated shoes was saying they've tested a lot of athletes, or not even athletes sometimes, runners right down to maybe 6 hour marathon runners, and the benefits are from top to bottom. So whether you're a 3 hour marathon runner or a 6 hour marathon runner, you're getting somewhere between 4 to 8% performance increase from these carbon shoes. So they really do work. And actually, if you're a slower runner, you'll get more benefit from the carbons because you're spending more time out there. So
Oh,
actually, you'll have a bigger chunk of
yeah.
time saved. So do you remember your first time, and what were they?
Yeah, but I mean, I think my first pair of carbons was a Hoka. And that was before the Nike Alpha Flies and Vapor Flies. So they were less developed,
Mm.
I would say. So I probably didn't have quite that Bambi on ice experience, but I certainly had that sense of they were different and could feel that propulsion for sure. And I ran my first two marathons, I think, in the same Hoka carbon.
And then your Rome PB, was that in Adios Pro Freeze?
It's as well. So I took the Adios Pro 3s with me, but I also took the carbons, and I like had a real major shoe wobble, didn't know what to wear. And I've intended to run in the Pro 3s. That was the idea. I'd broken the Pro 3s in. I liked them, but for some reason, I think it was because I'd run marathons before in the carbons, and I've not really done any training in them, so they still had the mileage in the tank, and I put the Hokas on at the last minute. I
Yeah.
think I had them both on my feet, not at the same time, obviously.
Yeah, you can have multiple
But
pairs and decide on the day. You don't need
yeah,
to, all you
I
need to
put
make sure of is that they're both worn in, and that
yeah,
you're not just
yeah,
buying a new pair of carbons and wearing them for the first time on race day, because that's a
yeah.
one-way ticket to blisters and struggling.
Ouch. Yeah,
Yeah, you need to
absolutely.
know how they
Yeah,
feel. You need to be accustomed to the shoe.
yeah,
But yeah, let's talk a little bit about how do we figure out kind of when a shoe is coming to the end of its life? How do you approach it?
yeah. When
And
do you retire a shoe?
because we have so many now that you don't want to waste them, but you also don't want to run too long in them
Yeah,
and risk picking up an injury or limit your performance because the shoe just isn't giving you what you want anymore. So yeah, what do you tend to look for in terms of when your shoes are
Well,
nearing?
I think I look for what the manufacturer recommends mileage-wise that you should run in a shoe. I think one of the useful things about both Strava and Garmin, and I'm sure other watches have the same feature and other running apps, is that you can plumb your shoe in to into your profile, and then obviously you can set kind of how many miles you want to run in that shoe, and it'll tell you when it's coming up for the end of its life. So I think that's one useful way with shoes to determine if you want to go with the manufacturer's kind of recommendation as your golden rule. Do that, saves you working out the miles you've done. A lot of my shoes go through at the toe because, like, I think I stick my toe up as I'm running. I must do something.
Mine are the same, yeah.
Quite often I'm replacing them because they don't look great. That's the kind of God's honest truth, is that they don't look wonderful, so I get
Yeah.
another pair. I think I always err on the side. I've ran with so many people, I think, who've kind of missed the signals that the shoes are coming to the end of their life and ended up with an injury, namely shin splints.
Mm.
Shin splints is a great one. So, as soon as somebody says, "Oh, I think I'm getting shin splints," I'll always ask them, "When did you last replace your shoes?" Because that's quite common. So I think I'm looking out. In answer to your question, I'm looking out for the amount of mileage I've done in the shoes.
Yeah, yeah, there is that
Mm.
because ultimately there's a lot of recommendations out there now on kind of how long a shoe will last. So typically for a carbon plated shoe, you may be looking at around 200 good miles of running, which isn't a lot because these shoes are made with certain types of foam that have small, tiny holes in them. And when you strike the ground, those holes compress and then they propel you forward. So that's kind of how it works. But when you run on them for long periods of time, eventually those small holes just remain compressed. So they stop giving you that same forward propulsion because there's less kind of bounce in the foam. Sometimes it's about the eye test. So I think looking at the shoe, looking underneath the shoe and seeing if the main kind of impact areas are worn or smooth and, or there's big holes coming at the front, like you say, like we both experienced that. Paula Radcliffe spoke about this tabletop test that her dad told her to do when she was younger. And basically, if you pop the shoe on the table and it doesn't sit flat how it's supposed to, so it's kind of leaning slightly or one bit's worn, so it's kind of off, then that is time to throw the shoes as well. For the majority of shoes, like everyday runners, you're looking at maybe between 400 to 500 solid miles, but some people might wear their shoes out earlier, some might get a little bit longer. So some of the variables to take into account is like some people strike the ground harder than others, are quite heavy footed. This could lead to, the midsole wearing out quicker. Some people live in wetter climate. So if your shoes are constantly getting wet, this can wear down the materials of the shoe and ultimately lead to them lasting less time. So if you are running in drier climates, if you're running on softer surfaces, so rather than like pounding the tarmac constantly, maybe you're on a softer kind of mud track. That can almost like the Middlewood Way, which we're lucky enough to have near us, Mum, is a kind of a great
Yeah,
track to run on because it's not super hard. So I think that helps with the longevity of the shoe as well. And then
yeah.
what would you suggest in terms of when the shoe has seen better days? What would you suggest in terms of getting rid of the shoe? Because there's a lot of options now in terms of like sustainability, or maybe not just
Yeah.
throwing them out and them being wasted. There might still be something or a use for those shoes. So have you got any suggestions that maybe people could use for that?
Yeah, so, you know, there's not many of my shoes that I'd be able to do this with, but, you know, ch charity shops will gladly take them off your hands. And I've had the occasional shoes that uh, mainly before I was out running trails, probably road shoes, where I've taken them to a charity shop because actually there's very little wrong with the shoe. I've just moved on for whatever reason. Perhaps it was at a time I've moved over brand, so I've got shoes that have still got some life into them, and I think it's a great thing to do is to perhaps give somebody else the opportunity to get the remainder of the mileage out of them. What I would suggest if you do take them to a charity shop is that you do perhaps pin a little note to say how many miles you've run in them, so that if somebody does pick them up, that they would know how many miles, because obviously what they don't know is that the rest of the life that's left. So that would be a suggestion for me. And then, of course, there's various places that will take your shoes off your hands. Some races, when you go to races, you'll sometimes see a big pile of kind of very, very tired and sometimes sad looking
Sad
trainers.
shoes, yeah.
Some of the weekend events I've done, Endure, Thunder Run, things like that. I'm pretty sure took your old trainers off you. And at the end of some of those events, quite a lot of people's trainers, I think they never wanted to put them on the feet again. But
Yeah.
there's an idea. Look out at races if there's anywhere. I'm sure that if you contact the race organisers, they'll let you know if they're going to be making any such collections.
Yeah.
And then the likes of Nike, so you can take your shoes into a Nike store. Runners Need is another store that will take your shoes off you, and they'll recycle them. So there's no need to throw them into the bin ever. You know, there's always one option, whatever the state of the shoes. So those would be my suggestions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if we can get some use out of them, or someone else can, or maybe they're not even intending to use them to run, and maybe they're just a comfortable shoe for somebody to wear, and yes, their best days of running are behind them, but maybe they can still be useful to somebody to just walk around, and, maybe they're just
Okay.
going out on a daily walk and they could get some use from them. But there's also a big company that I've
Yeah.
seen around a few times called Jog On, and they're all about sustainability and recycling shoes, so they might be worth checking out as well.
Okay.
But I think
Yeah.
that's pretty much running shoes
Fantastic.
covered. Basically, if you can get a gait analysis done, go and do that. It's really, really helpful and can help you find the right shoe for you, which could limit injury and help you get the most performance. But if you can't do that, if there's not one particularly close, you could buy multiple pairs of shoes and try them on, figure out which one fits the best, and then go from there. So there are options for you. But yeah, don't do what I did when I first got into running and just buy them off the look or buy what the latest performance enhancers are. Do some research, try different ones, and yeah, find what works for you, and that's the best route for you in the long run.
Some
That's
brands will let you return them as well if you buy them. And I'm probably not running outside. If memory serves me right, there are certain brands that will allow you to kind of wear them around the house, get a feel for them, see if what the fit's like.
yeah.
So
I'm
yeah,
not saying you should do this, but sometimes you can get a little sneaky run in them, and as long as you're not going anywhere like a gritty trail,
don't go on. Yeah, yeah,
you might be
don't go
able,
on a
as long as you keep them clean, you might be able to get a decent kilometer or two in, and then decide, yeah, these are a little bit tight.
yeah.
Give them a little wet wipe and send them back. But I haven't told you to do that. But yeah, hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hopefully that gives you some interesting insight into what to do if you're looking to buy a pair of running shoes. And if you have enjoyed it, hit 5 stars on Spotify, leave a comment, leave a review, whatever you can, and we will speak to you very soon. Thank you very much, Mother.
You're very welcome, son. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.